We're going to take a walk down the rabbit hole today, friends, as we dive deeper into the Bob Lazar sessions. Dennis Nappi II, and welcome to the first episode of the Future Forecast podcast. I'm joined with my mentor, my teacher, my colleague, and my good friend, Daz Smith, who was the project manager of this incredible journey we went on. And we're going to just talk about his experience as the tasker and piece it all together. Daz, how's it going, my friend?
Hi there. Yeah, doing well. And it's an honor to be one of the first guests on this new podcast. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, we kind of started this journey together with just so many things you and I have worked on together. So I think it's going to be a really good discussion getting onto this. Before we jump into that, I just want to address all the viewers out there. There's been a shift in some of the things that we're doing. I've actually stepped out of the normal debrief, and I'm going to be doing these podcasts now where we can take some deeper dives, explore some of the woo, and just really see where the conversations take us. So it won't always just be data focused as we are in the full debriefs here. So I've stepped into this role here with the podcast to just kind of explore things and bring you guys some of that extra content and extra discussion that I know a lot of you are asking for. So it should be a fun journey. Feel free to send some discussions on things that we can explore. I think it's a little bit easier to have these discussions as opposed to some of the tasking requests that we get. We can't always get to it, so maybe we can explore some of those topics here in the podcast. So more to come on that. But let's get into this Bob Lazar project, Daz, and your experience. I'd like to know just kind of where the inspiration came from and your thoughts on it before as you got into this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a long history for me really because as well as being involved in remote viewing, almost three decades now. I've also been just as involved in what was called UFO research back then. Now we call it like UAP research. And I really started my journey in UFO research in 1989, actually, which is the year that Bob Lazar, came out, and I managed to get some audio tapes of radios. He was on, I think it was Coast to Coast Radio with Art Bell. So I've been really kind of interested in Bob Lazar's story. Literally now, what was that? 34 years later.
It's been a while.
Yeah, although there are, you can find some good research online now, which is pro Lazar, and then there's also anti Lazar stuff that you can find
Mm-hmm.
online. And we have to be honest, there are some big holes in the Bob Lazar story.
Right.
But for me, some core elements of what he said and the way he said things, in '89 and still to this very day, 30 odd years later, it kind of rings true to me. And I see details from other sources that also bolster his story a bit. So that's where I've been with it, really. Yeah, I first heard of Bob Lazar in 1989 when he first came out, Coast to Coast Radio, and I followed his story ever since. Of course, it's only been in the last couple of years he's come forward again because of
Mm-hmm.
the Jeremy Corbell Bob Lazar documentary. For 20 odd years, he kind of receded into the background, and no one knew anything about what he was doing. Uh,
Yeah.
and I always thought it would be an amazing remote viewing project to do, but more so now in the last 2 years with all the recent revelations, and especially the more recent revelations from the that happened in Congress from the
Yeah, the
whistleblower
congressional hearings. Yeah.
Rush. Yeah, I thought what he said and what he presented, and there, I can give you an audio clip of this that you can maybe piece in if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
um, of Grush actually saying, to Congress that he found evidence of an active UAP recovery program
Right.
and special access projects, reverse engineering programs that went back decades using, hidden or secret or inappropriately acknowledged fundings. And he even talks, there are bodies and craft and all kinds of stuff involved. And that being said by someone in his position took on Congress, which
Mm.
mirrors the Bob Lazar story, which he started, when he said all this 34 years ago. I
Right.
just thought it was the ideal time to get the team to look at it, really, and hence
Yeah.
hence recent project.
Yeah, I think your timing is perfect. It's huge in the news, which I think maybe in the second half of this we can get into my thoughts on that and how everything just happens to be coming together at just the right time here.
Yeah.
and the gradual buildup to all of this. So I'd like to explore that in a little bit. But I think it was a great idea for a project. A little bit of background on the Bob Lazar story for those of you who aren't familiar with Bob Lazar at this point. And Daz, please fill in some details too. But Bob Lazar claimed to be an employee at Area 51, and he came out to George Knapp, right? He was using coincidentally the name Dennis, I believe, as he was leaking this information because he was in fear for his life at one point. Correct? He thought, I
Correct.
have
Yeah.
access to this information. They're going to kill me. They were monitoring his phone. They were following him. I think he was even threatened at one point.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the I guess confirming points of his story was he knew when these craft were going to be tested over was it over Groom Lake, and he would take
Absolutely.
people out and took
Yeah.
VHS recordings back then.
Yeah. And that's one
Um,
of the things that's, there could, because there are some holes in his story that have emerged over the years. His education being, no one's been able to find any details of education. But one of the biggest things for me that stuck in my mind all these years is no one knew about Area 51 back in 1989.
right.
It wasn't talked about until
Mm-mm.
Bob Lazar came out and talked about, S4 and Area 51. But as
Right.
you said, not only that, he took John Lear out and a few others, and they video recorded UAPs
Right.
being test flown. Um, and to this day, no one's given me a reasonable explanation, because a lot of people think that Lazar's fake, but they've
Mm-hmm.
not been able to give me an explanation on how someone who was fake knew about a top secret base
Right.
that no one was talking about. But he
Right.
also knew the perfect place to go to and the time and the date to,
Correct.
get filming of the test flights.
Right. And I agree. There's holes in the story and some things that don't add up.
Yeah.
But you're also dealing with cloak and dagger type of stuff and intelligence, and who knows what his reasons would be for lying. I mean, he was afraid for his life, so
Yeah. Absolutely.
maybe he put false trails out there to protect his own self or people in his circle. But at the end of the day, he brought back and now what's interesting is as the story unfolds and things that he said that made no sense back then
Yeah.
it's now as that we understand computer technology and a little bit more about consciousness, these things are starting to make a lot more sense as we hear that, including element 115, which was a data point in our
Yeah.
debrief. That
Absolutely.
didn't
Yeah.
exist
Yeah.
back then, and now they're just starting to figure out like, oh, this is a thing.
Yes. Yes.
you know
They don't think it, they don't think they can make it as solid as Lazar said it,
right.
the samples that he worked with is, but you know, um, who knows what might occur in a few more years' time with a bit more research on that one.
Right.
Yes.
Research and throw AI into the mix, which that
Yes.
could again another rabbit hole
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
explore with this. So let's talk about your specific tasking itself and then your intent behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So because we didn't know if the event was real, in fact, I haven't got the tasking here, but I can put it up. I'm sorry, you might have to edit this bit out. Bear with me a
That's
sec.
okay. I'll just pause. Let's do that.
Okay, so the tasking for this, as always with remote viewing, it's a random number, and it had two parts to this random number. It was G7N9 L2H8, and the actual tasking I wrote down for this was Robert Bob Lazar, S4 near Area 51 in Nevada Desert, USA. And I wanted to look at the specific time period of December 1988 to the end of February 1989, because that was a key time that he said, in his first interviews that he did, that he worked there at this S4 Area 51. So I tasked the viewers to go to that date to see if they could see if Bob Lazar was actually working in the place he said he worked on the kind of things that he said he worked. And
Right.
it was a two-part project. It was really an ARV project in that I had two outcomes. The one outcome was the A outcome, which was Bob Lazar working at Area 51 on advanced tech.
Mm-hmm.
The second outcome was if all that information is completely false, it's myth and it's like a social construct, it didn't exist, then the remote viewers would go to a statue that I have in my back garden of the Buddha, and they would describe that instead. Um, no one described the Buddha statue, so I can only assume that all the way the mechanism of RV works is that all the consciousnesses did find a real event, and they went there and they described this real event of Bob Lazar and these very advanced craft.
I think that was a brilliant way to task it to try to rule out because we know from experience you can review a fictitious event
Yes.
and get data on the fictitious event. Now, I think some of the more experienced viewers are able to get that feel like, hey, this feels fake, but not everybody's. People with less experience, probably at my level, would just report the data and as if it was a
Yeah.
real event because that it exists. Because I think when you look at consciousness, we are creating some kind of construct out there in the ether that
Yes.
exists. On some level, there's a reality to it that you can tap into. That doesn't mean it really happened in this physical timeline, though.
Absolutely. And I have many experiments that I've done in RV in the past that kind of prove as remote viewers that we can quite, just as easily retrieve information that is a social construct or it is
Right.
a thought in someone's imagination. So I can, any of us as remote viewers can pick up data that, isn't physical or real. And we have to be honest with every project that we do, so, including this Bob Lazar one, in that we the viewers brought back amazing data on this, but we have to be honest in that because we don't have absolute feedback to be able to confirm all the data,
Right.
there still is a possibility that some of the data may be myth or social constructs that the remote viewers brought back until we get feedback, which may be many years into the future.
Right.
um that has to remain a possibility.
Right. Yeah. And the other piece of that is, it could have been a real event, like you're saying, but there's myth around the original event that we could have been picking up on that noise too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We know, the Bob Lazar thing, unfortunately is a big noisy kind of
Hmm.
area. He is a controversial figure within
Right.
ufology that kind of splits it. It's like 50-50. We believe him, 50% of people don't believe his story.
Now, what are the chances, Daz, that this is such a big myth out there with so many minds, so many levels of consciousness focused on this story that it could still be a fake story and it was just so loud and bright that we missed the Buddha statue, even though that's where we needed to be? Is that a possibility?
I think that's still a possibility that we have to
Okay.
be honest with ourselves as remote viewers and prepare for, and let people know that that is a possibility with our data. I'm I probably think that that's not the case in this case because the remote viewing data was so concise,
Yeah.
and all of it gelled together, especially on the technology. Every viewer that including yourself, that described the mechanisms of the craft, um, which interestingly aren't the kind of technology details that have been discussed in regards to Bob Lazar and this sport model craft that he detailed in the past. He detailed how the gravity systems work and the engine work and
Right.
stuff. But you guys, as remote viewers, brought back huge amounts of data about how the craft could move through dimensions and bend time and space,
Yeah.
and that was across the board with all the viewers, and
Yeah.
that shocked even me. Being a person that's followed the Bob Lazar thing for 34 years, is all that data that you guys contributed. Um, that opened my eyes a little bit on that one. So to me, it doesn't feel like you're picking up on a social construct because that part hasn't been a part of the social construct history of Bob Lazar and the sport model craft
Right.
that's out there. It's not really talked about, or he's never discussed that it can travel through time and space and
Yeah.
portals and stuff.
And I think I said this in the debrief too. I had years ago, I had an opportunity to interview Phil Corso Jr., the son of Colonel Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell. And we talked a lot. It was a great conversation. The podcast was a great conversation. And at the end, what he said was the things that we can't talk about is time manipulation, time travel. And that's where he left it with me. So the fact that we're getting this information and it's not released, it's not out there, I think lends a little bit of credibility to, yeah, maybe there is a little bit more to this that we're not being made aware of, which then you could go down the thread, which we're not right now, of all the Mandela effect stuff. And
Yeah,
I mean, that's a whole wild ride to explore. And maybe in another, conversation we can do that.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I think you guys got some very good data. Um, but again, we do have holes in the Lazar story, but more is coming out, and it is bolstered a little bit, like by what you said, like the Corso book, The Day After Roswell. I think that adds an element of credibility to
Hmm.
the Bob Lazar story in an ad hoc way, but more so the David Gruesh congressional hearing stuff. I think that adds even more weight. It would be
Right.
even more beneficial for the Lazar story if we ever get to find out, because he did say to Congress that he knows who's running these programs and where these programs are
Yeah.
being run, but he didn't say that out in public. You know, if that comes out that it is an area called S4 at Area 51, I think that would add even more weight to the story.
Right. Right. If they're still there, I mean, there's rumors that they've moved too, right? But
Yeah,
it
yeah,
sounds like they used to be in that area, and based on our data, we were at that time period, we were definitely seeing activity there,
yeah.
without a doubt.
I mean, if it were me, after because it was Bob Lazar that essentially made Area 51 famous.
Right.
Um, if it were me running a program like that that had been ousted, in 89 to the key
Hmm.
years was 89 to 93, 94, I probably would have moved it all after that if it was
Oh
me.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were gone after that. That would only make
Yeah.
sense.
And then just use the Area 51 kind of like area as like a cover story, keep
Right.
getting people talking about that in an act of misdirection. So
Hmm.
you have them looking over here while you've moved it way over here to the north somewhere. Yeah. That's what I
Which
would have done.
which which makes me wonder, was Bob Lazar intentional? Was
Well,
he
yeah,
part of an intentional program?
that's a good question, isn't it? It's something I've dwelled over many times.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't think so, because he has been a bit of a maverick against them. Um, but I do believe that they probably did bring him in. And people say, oh, he's got no recognizable history, because we can't find his education and stuff.
Right.
And he's a bit of a maverick kind of lone gun type person. But when you read through the evidence, and more so the recent documents that came out over the last couple of years called the Wilson Davis memo,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and that kind of adds even more weight to the Lazar story, because that talks about Admiral Wilson, who tried to
Yeah.
get access to uh,
Yeah.
crash recovery programs, and this was when I think he was acting director of the
He was like deputy
DIA.
director of DIA, or acting
Yeah.
director. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even he was refused. They told him, you do not have the credentials for this program. But they did
Yeah.
admit to him that there was a program.
Right.
But they also said in the documents, and I have the documents here on my desktop, and maybe you would want to bring them up or something, but it actually details in those documents, we've tried on and off for 30 years to reverse engineer this technology,
Yeah.
but we're getting nowhere with it. Um,
They confirmed Corso's book in those documents, I
they
think,
did
right?
confirm
Yeah,
Corso's book
in
as
that in
well.
those documents.
So again, all of it seems to add more weight to the Lazar story. And I kind of think to myself, I don't think it would be too far a possibility for them to have brought an out of the box type person like
Right.
Lazar into it, because this document detail, the Wilson memo details that they just weren't getting anywhere. You know,
Hmm.
I could see them trying with an outsider, who thinks outside the box, to
Right.
see if he could bring anything new to the equation. Because
Right.
what would they have to lose anyway? So I could see
Right.
how the Lazar scenario would fit into all this other emerging stuff that's come out over the last couple of years.
Well, it's interesting in thinking about some of the tactics that might be employed. I go back to Bill Cooper, and he was an intel guy with the military, and he was shown. See, he talked about being shown secret documents about UFO crafts. Very similar story. But towards the end of his career, before he was killed, he says, I don't know if they showed me those documents on purpose to lead me down a false trail to put this information out to all of you. Because I think in the end, his story changed. He went from like this UFO invasion to nope, it's all fake. So which is curious. And I always come back to things like that. So is it possible that Lazar was shown this stuff to put him out there to send us down this thread? Because,
Very possible.
in the military and in the intel community, they do what's called deception denial.
Yeah.
So what are they really covering is what I'd like to know.
Absolutely. Again, that's a very strong possibility. I think
Hmm.
that he could have just been exposed to then go out and do what he does to
Right.
create a new kind of social story. And
And
maybe
believe
he,
it himself. So he's being
oh,
truthful. He
absolutely, yeah,
believes what
yeah,
he's putting out there.
yeah, totally. Maybe it was a diversion thing. Let's divert people to look at Area 51 while the real stuff is going on,
Right.
hundreds of miles away somewhere else.
Right.
All of that is a possibility at this stage. Um, yeah, I just don't know, because the way that Zar talks, we've all seen the videos, and the way he talks and the way he describes things, it feels like he's such a genuine person that truly, it looks like he truly believes he saw an anti-gravity engine that he worked upon.
Right. And I think he did, Daz.
Yeah,
I think what if this is true, if and I don't know, I'm exploring just an idea that comes to my head. But if it's true that he was shown something, so he would spread this story, him not knowing that that was the intention behind it, him really
yeah,
feeling that panic, and he was just being manipulated. I'm sure he 100% believes this is what I saw and this was my experience. I don't think the man's lying. I really don't. I don't think he's
yeah,
making this up. I don't think he's lying. I think he's telling the truth based on what his experience was. Now,
yeah.
was there manipulation behind that experience? I don't know. I think that's something to ponder.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that as well. I'm on the long same lines as you. There is a very strong possibility that there's been some heavy manipulation
Mm-hmm.
within the Lazar story. Um, but in my head, I'm like, I always kind of try to compute to what ends. What would they get out other than misdirecting where people look? Um,
Right.
I don't. I think Lazar might have caused more damage if it is damage. Do you know what I mean? Than good
Well,
for them.
I think it depends on what the long game is, Daz.
Yes, yes,
Because look where we are now. And I want to dive into this in the second half of this conversation because I want to get back to the data and talk about that.
yeah,
But look where we are now and how this information is coming out and the way it's coming out. I mean, it just seems, and I'm always a conspiracy theorist, but on some level, I wonder, is this intended to come out in the way that it's coming out? And you create the conflict because the players at this lower level, they
yeah,
believe this side versus this side, what they're doing, but up here's just puppet master playing this
yeah.
side against this side to create this outcome. So I wonder if there's a big long game going on there.
It's very possible, and although this might be kind of a weird way to go with this, me picking this target to give to you guys at this time might also be part of the some kind of manipulation circle.
I think about that in a lot of the discussions we've had. And I actually, in my own podcast, have held back putting things out because sometimes I don't want to contribute to a certain thread because I think
Yeah,
it empowers whatever is going on.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, if you're talking about manipulation through consciousness, which is again a different discussion, but
uh,
or
yeah. I mean,
influence.
it's something that's at the forefront of my mind right now because of what we just done with the Lazar project, and
Right.
everything's going on in Congress and around the world with disclosure.
Yeah.
Um, it's compounded by other projects that I'm working on of a similar
Hmm.
ilk where I'm getting huge amounts of
Yeah.
previously unreleased UAP remote viewing information from top sources. And I'm thinking
Hmm.
to myself, uh, why now? Why do they want me to release it now? So
Yeah.
I think the possibility of all of us being manipulated in this kind of circle of life of
Hmm.
whatever they're doing out there is very, very possible.
I'm fighting every urge not to probe that, Dad. So we'll move past it.
Yeah, we can talk about that one off camera.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But I understand what you're saying. Let's get into the data a little bit, and then a little bit further down, we can get into some more woo stuff because I want to talk about this. There were several points of corroboration on this project. What stands out, the most? We talked about the time manipulation. What else stands out to you as the project manager? What other data points were you seeing?
Oh, it was mainly that, if I'm honest with you, that blew
Hmm.
me away. But also, everyone did get very good location data for a dry, desolate,
Yeah.
kind of top secret landscape
Right.
as well, and a lot of data about security and the
Hmm.
levels of security around this kind of thing as well. Which I thought was very good for locating in time and space this actual event.
That was interesting. I shared one data point. It was about this spherical object that was kind of searching and scanning, and I was like, I don't know if this fits or not. And then Dolan told us at the end, he's like, actually, I know a story of these drones that someone described that looked just like what you were saying. Maybe they were there at the facility. We'll never know. But there was those
Yeah.
interesting nuggets. For those of you that haven't watched the presentation yet, it was launched. What's today? Saturday, September 9th. It was launched yesterday on the 8th. Take a look at it under the mysteries tier. Um, just a fascinating conversation as we go through that data. I saw there was a lot of data looking at the technical expertise behind it. There was data looking at Bob Lazar himself, or who we think was Bob Lazar. Nobody named him as Lazar. Can we talk a little bit about that, Daz? What we were seeing?
Yeah. I didn't think it was as strangely. I didn't think the data on Lazar was as strong as I was hoping we would get. I was hoping we would get
Right.
because the team are usually pretty good, especially Edward, Naeem,
Right.
and especially Dick at drawing
Right.
faces.
Yeah.
I was hoping to get like a bespectacled kind of face in there, but we didn't get one. But the
Right.
descriptions were quite on about someone that was a researcher at a researcher level working
Yeah.
on this advanced tech, that he was under stress, lots of small details like that. But yeah, I was hoping to get a sketch. I didn't get one in this case, but that's the case with RV. I think most of
Right.
you uh were drawn more towards the biggest high entropy thing there at the target, which is the
Right.
obviously the craft themselves and
Right.
how they move and do their thing.
I do remember describing a person, and I just kept getting like he's trying to understand the functionality and the purpose and the application. I kept getting those concepts, and I think everything else would be above my head to interpret anyway. What he was looking at, but I think that came through quite strongly on that.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Great. I mean, as again, great data from everyone on it. And after even myself been doing this, nearly 3 decades now, it just amazes me with each project that I'm involved with how data comes in, and it just blows me away. It's like every day's Christmas really with remote viewing.
I'm still surprised every time. Every tiny corroborating piece of data you get on, no matter what the target is, whether you're looking at just a building or you're looking at a woo-woo target like Bob Lazar. I'm still fascinated and excited watching all you guys work and watch everything come in. It's incredible to me. I don't understand why more people aren't excited about what this is and what it can do. It's
Yeah,
still mind blowing.
it's one of the great mysteries, I guess.
Yeah, it
But
sure is.
one of the things that really impacted me with this RV session, though, that you guys all did was, and it's not again, it was something out of the blue that I didn't expect, is that all the remote viewers in all the sketches and data, you were all detailing like these rays or something underneath the
Yeah,
craft, and there was a water kind of influx and an energy kind of influx with that as
right,
well. And I find that very interesting because none of that's ever been mentioned with the Lazar story, but it has other craft
right.
UAP stories.
I mean, that's the Tic Tac story. They said the craft was doing something on. There was one subsurface. There's other
Yep,
stories where they see these craft just sucking water up.
absolutely. It reminds me
Are
of
they
the
powered?
Ingo Swan penetration story because that's what he saw at the lake in
That's
Alaska.
that's what it was. I was like, there is a story about this, yeah, where they
Yeah,
take up
yeah,
the water and maybe they're powered by it.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe
So
that's where
great.
they're from. Maybe they're from under the ocean. Who knows?
Yeah.
We could go on forever about that. Um, but it was an incredible session. It was really neat to have Richard Dolan joining us on the discussion as well. How'd you make that contact, Daz? That's pretty cool.
I've been speaking to Richard a couple of times recently about remote viewing, and also we were both looking into, coincidentally, we were both looking into Ingo Swan's penetration book,
Right.
um, and his, for those people who don't know, Ingo Swan wrote a book called Penetration, where he details how a shadowy government agency contacted him to remote view the moon, and he saw structures and life forms on the moon doing all kinds of strange stuff. And then later on in the book, they took him to see in somewhere he thinks is in Alaska, a UFO that emerged, it kind of emerged out of nothing, hovered over a lake, sucking up water, all that kind of stuff. So me and Richard were talking about this, and we were trying to work out if by going back through the book and through my research of Ingo Swan in his life in his archives, if we could try to get some details that might indicate who the famous Axelrod character is
Yeah.
in the book, who
I was
works
just going to
for
ask about him.
the
Yeah.
government. Yeah. So that's what we were working on, trying to see if we could piece together some details from the book and from my history on who that might be. And then the Lazar project came up, and I thought, well, I've been speaking to Richard, and I've been watching Richard Dolan for many years on
Right.
YouTube and all this kind of stuff, and I know he's an absolute expert in this, and he has a way about him when he talks about the
Yeah.
technology and the
Yep.
aspects of UAPs as well. So yeah, after talking to him, I invited him along, and he was happy to come along. But even I was actually quite shocked at how blown away and his face as he was putting when he was looking at the RV data. That was quite nice to
Yeah.
see. Yeah,
the first 10 minutes, like we just showed one slide each, one image each, and he was just blown away.
yeah.
And that's neat to have somebody of his caliber and experience, who's
It
familiar with
is.
it. You know, he I think he had some training in remote viewing. He doesn't practice it really,
He's had
but
some exposure, yes, and I know his
yeah.
wife. She does remote viewing as well, and I know they both had small amount of exposure with Ingo Swan in the past as well.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they have, yes. So yeah, to see him be so blown away by the quality of RV data, that's
Right.
said quite a lot to me as well. And not only about the data that you guys brought back, but about us as a group and the product we're putting out, and the fact that we can
Mhm.
literally blow the mind of someone that's an expert in their field in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure he's seen a lot of things, something
Yeah.
that he probably doesn't talk about publicly for good reason. So to have that reaction from him was pretty incredible.
Absolutely. It'd be great if we can get him on a podcast, and all these weeks later, because it's probably like 2-3 weeks later now to
Yeah,
now he's had time to kind of like digest all this, just to to get his input on this in a little bit more detail.
I'd love to pick his brain if he wants to come on. He's definitely got an open invite, so
Yeah,
we can have that discussion.
we'll
That would
see
be
if we can
great.
arrange a freeway or something.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be a fun conversation. You know, thinking about Ingo and Bob Lazar, you know, this common theme of this secret government. I mean, that's X-Files type of stuff. But you know, and even looking at the congressional hearings, I mean, it seems like that might be a legit thing, right?
It, yeah, I mean, if you combine, I mean, we've heard about this kind of secret government, Majestic 12. They
Yep.
they they initially called it. Going, I first heard about it around about 1989 and been following it ever since. I have
Yeah.
uh I have all the so far alleged real Majestic 12 documents, probably about 200-300 pages of those in book form
Yeah.
that I purchased over the years. So there does seem to be some kind of paper trail there. Again, it's controversial. It's like the Czar story. A lot of people disbelieve it. A lot of people believe it. I don't know. Again, I think it's probably half real, half misinformation, trying to misdirect us. But it does
Yeah.
seem like there is a shadowy government in place, and the Wilson memo notes, absolutely contributed to that for me, because if Admiral Wilson with all his credentials couldn't get access to the program, and they
Right.
essentially say, no, you're not on the list, you're not getting in.
Right.
um and he was told if he looked at it any further, he'd lose two general pips, was it? I think they said to him, and he
Yeah.
wouldn't, he'd lose his pensions and everything, so he had to
Yeah.
shut up. And
Step
he
back.
yeah, and we're talking some of the guys, top guys in, like, in there, in intel and government
Yeah.
here.
That's a powerful
So
position.
yeah, that added a bit more deep, seeing the Wilson notes like that, and knowing the people behind the Wilson notes, Eric Davis and Howard
Right.
Putoff and a few of the others. They're very credible people. So
Right.
I believe the Wilson notes are absolutely 100% real. And then, on top of this, we now have Rush coming out saying, I was paid to look into this by my own government. I found special access programs. They're essentially operating illegal, and they're doing. They got crashed craft. Not He didn't say crashed, actually. He said they got retrieved and recovered
Retrieved.
craft, which they're back engineering. And he also talked about them possibly having non-human intelligence bodies as well as all this. So yeah, the last couple of years, the data, the supporting data that's come out is quite strong on
Yeah.
this secret shadowy government. But I'm not an American, so it's hard for me to say. But if I was an American like you guys, I would be up in arms right now. I'd be angry that your taxes, your millions and millions, well, we're talking trillions of dollars, have gone to black projects that no one
Uh-huh.
knows and no one can have access to, and the general population aren't getting access to the technology that could be derived from that. I find that
But
shocking.
the American people are for the most part too distracted,
Yes,
whether
there's a
it's
lot of
from
things.
entertainment based stuff or stress based
Yeah,
stuff. And I think that, you know, this ties into a lot of things, ties back into consciousness, ties back into our awareness, our focus, possible manipulation of things. You know, I mean, this will bring me right back to the Gnostic text, not to get, you know, spiritual, but, you know, will cast mankind out into the world because he realized he's like the gods, and occupy his mind in chaos so he's not focused on matters of the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit. So
Yeah.
people have lost that signal, that drive. I mean, those of us probably watching this program, and you and myself, we felt that call, like, hey, I need to explore this. I mean, Richard said the same thing. This, you just feel driven to it,
Yeah.
and then you just go and you go, and it becomes an obsession for a while as you're trying to
Yeah.
uncover things. Um,
But
so
yeah,
I think, go ahead.
well, I was, just to iterate, it just shocks me. You have this guy in Congress saying, they're spending your millions on
Right,
programs that you can't see, and
right,
even the people in Congress, the senators, aren't allowed access to,
right.
and they don't even know that the money is being spent. But obviously, the money is being spent. We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars,
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
and the technology that could be derived from this could quite potentially, we don't know at this stage because we don't know what it is, but you would have thought it might have some very good scientific and medical, maybe even social applications for the betterhood of everyone on the planet.
And that's getting into the why, if that's true, and then who are they that are
Yeah.
running this, and
Yeah.
who are we in their eyes?
Yeah.
That there might be a reason for that. I mean, if you're looking at social
Yes.
control, and again, probably part two, we'll get into that deep dive there. I think we're getting close to that point right now because we keep dancing around it.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to keep us grounded right now on the data before we go too deep off the
Sorry.
rails here.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. Don't be
It
sorry. I mean,
just,
I'm
the whole thing just opens up a huge smorgasbord of
it
possibilities with all
does.
this, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I keep thinking, I keep coming back to Lazar's interview on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's like, where do you think these things came from? He says, well, an archaeological dig. And that's mind blowing, especially when you tie in the work of Graham Hancock. And what he's saying is that there was a high society here, a high intelligence
Yeah.
here. That at the end of the Younger Dryas, which we just worked, that was for Hellfire. We did a project on that with Darby, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking at that, it's almost like Indiana Jones. They were going through looking for this ancient technology. And Indiana Jones even got into the alien woo at one point in time.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
who
Oh,
who
there's,
are they? Who were they?
undoubtedly, our whole existence has been mirrored by what can only be classed as advanced, not non-human intelligence. Both
Yeah.
physical and non-physical.
But does that make them alien? Is the question.
I don't call them alien. I don't think they're alien.
Yeah. Neither do
But
I.
saying that, we might be talking a little bit grey here, in the fact
Hmm.
that it's not so grey, or shades of grey. There's more in between. So there probably are some interactions with non-humans that are, I don't know, interdimensional,
Yeah.
non-physical, but there might be a spattering there of real non-Earth alien kind of
Right.
things going on as well. I think it's a smorgasbord of all different types of
There's a
things.
lot.
That being humans, we just try to lump into something really simple into one or two things. But I think
Right.
there's a lot going on, with all the things like fairies and angels and
Hmm.
sprites and gods. I think, yeah, some of it's probably non-Earth based.
Yeah.
Uh,
Jacques
I don't
Vallée
like
did
I don't like
a
the word alien, but non-Earth based life. But and I
yeah.
think some of it also is non-human life, which is both
Yes.
physical and non-physical. That we can see sometimes, and sometimes we can't see. Animals can see better than us, because they got
Right.
more frequencies that they can see and stuff like that. I just think that, yeah, there's a huge amount going on and it's very complex. We tried
Agreed.
to oversimplify it a little bit, I think.
We do, and I think it's important to point out that you said physical and non-physical as well, because we tend to think of these things as like, oh, they're physical here and we can touch them and reach out, but
Yeah,
there's intelligent energy that exists out
yeah,
there that
yeah,
could be playing a role in all of this. I mean, it could be consciousness itself that's a part of these craft that's driving
absolutely.
part of this story.
Yeah, I think consciousness plays a huge role in all of this, in all of UAP research, and I think even the people that are now heavily into UAP research, UAPs and UFOs, are starting to realize the role that consciousness has to play in this as well.
Yeah, I think it was Dolan a couple of years ago who said that. He said consciousness is key
Yeah,
into exploring and understanding what's going on. I think as remote viewers, we've talked about it even on the program.
yeah,
The
yeah,
significance of consciousness as we're moving into what seems to be a new era, at least publicly, in understanding these things.
Yeah,
I think consciousness is absolutely important, and I wonder if we're rising to a different level to step into that new paradigm.
quite possibly. Yeah, with all the revelations that are happening and stuff. There's definitely
Yeah.
something afoot. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to start moving into some woo stuff, Daz, but I'm thinking we'll do 2 episodes of this. So why don't we close this out? What are your final thoughts? Let's go. Anything else we want to cover on the Bob Lazar project itself? Because I know we're bouncing around a little bit, but
It was a
about our
good
data.
project.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic information. I'm still in the background trying to get the project in front of the right people. So I'm trying to get like
Yeah.
Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, and Lazar team to have a look at it themselves, because they might see something in it that we didn't
Right.
see at the time, and they might be able to give us some more feedback on it. So,
Yeah.
watch this space because there might be a bit more coming from this. Is what I'm saying. I am trying to get access to these people, but as we know, with all the revelations that's happening at the moment, especially in Congress and stuff, they are incredibly busy.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
There is.
But I think this is still important data. I think it's still good data.
Yes.
And possibly some unknown stuff, publicly that can help
Absolutely. Yeah.
piece some of the puzzle together. All
Hopefully,
right.
hopefully, with what's happening in Congress, and if Gresh, gets the details out, and if Congress and the senators manage to do something with that, we might actually get some feedback towards this very soon. And when I say soon, in within a couple of years, maybe.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think it's going to go that distance, Daz?
There's always a hope in me that it will.
Right.
Um, I have a feeling that these people are a lot more powerful though, and they'll find ways to shut the senators and the approaches down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you look at this because it was at the Clinton versus Trump election here in the US, right? Yeah, Obama had just ended and the WikiLeaks was really big. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And this was John Podesta's emails were leaked into WikiLeaks, and that's where he was having contact with Tom DeLonge.
Yeah.
And their conversations back and forth was about trying to get this information out, which ultimately became To the Stars Academy, and trying to get people to understand through books and media and understanding. So it sounds like there is some agenda here trying to bring this information out. And that got put on hold when Clinton didn't win the election, but then they still were able to come through with their plan with that release with the To the Stars Academy and get that information out there. It's been such a gradual release. I keep coming back to this looks like it's just rolling out slowly at little bits at a time to gradually acclimate people to this idea and this concept. I'm just wondering your thoughts on what's the end game here.
I don't know. I do agree. There does seem to be some kind of rollout program, but there also seems to be a warring conflict between some people that want it out and some people that don't. So
Right.
I'm fighting within myself, a bit schizophrenic in my
Yeah.
feelings of yes, it looks like an approach. It's rolled out. We're definitely being revealed this on a slow basis. But then my other side's going, but hang on here. I see this warring going on. It doesn't make sense. I can't consign the two together at this point. So I
It's
I
hard.
it is hard, yeah. But yeah, and that comes from not knowing the entire picture,
We don't have the whole picture.
yeah,
But I remember when Ancient Aliens first came out, like the first 2 seasons,
yeah,
on a channel like the History Channel, to have the ask the questions they were asking. I mean, I think they kind of went really kind of deep after that.
yeah.
But those first 2 seasons, I remember being floored. I remember watching this going, oh my gosh, I shouldn't know this. Like this shouldn't be public like this. It was amazing to see it on the History Channel. I think that was kind of another big start to, and then everything started to come out after that.
Yeah, it's grown in such a pace. I mean, on another program level, I've been watching the two series, the Skinwalker and Beyond Skinwalker Ranch,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we have like some of the world's top scientists and
Right.
media companies talking about finding a portal, above the ground that manifests
Right.
things. So the information that's coming out is coming out so thick and fast from many different levels.
And we've corroborated some of that data.
We have, yes,
Right.
we in future forecasting we worked again a UAP target that they filmed over the Skinwalker Ranch, and
Yeah.
we had in all the data that came out. Did you work on that one as well as a
I
viewer?
worked that one too.
Oh, you
Yeah.
did, yeah. I'm sure on that. And again, we should review it again and do a video on that because, or a
Yeah.
podcast on that, because I vaguely remember everyone come up with all this portal data, and it was
Yep.
only just this last season that's just finished of Skinwalker Ranch, where
Yeah.
they're absolutely convinced they've now got scientific evidence of a portal above the Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow. Yeah, that was one of my first big, like Dick always goes, I was there. Like I just had this view. I think it was through a portal, or think I went to the point of origin of wherever this was, and it was just a really cool visual of just this giant
Yeah,
craft where I was just sitting there kind of exploring it. But
yeah.
that was a fascinating target. And I think that ties in too, not just the fact that that story's coming out, but all of the things that are going on there. And then you look at the personalities that have been behind
Yeah.
this research.
Oh,
Are they tied into this shadow government, or are they this rogue force that's saying we want to uncover who they are and what's
it's
going
the
on?
it is the very same cast of characters. Yeah, we're talking the Bigelow team again. How
Yeah.
Putoff was
George
initially
Knapp's tied
involved.
into that, isn't he?
He was as
Like,
well. Yes, yes, and so they're
yeah,
all involved in Skinwalker Ranch or early Skinwalker Ranch stuff. But
right.
they've also been involved in the Lazar story. They've also been involved in the Wilson leak, and we
Right.
know How Putoff is one of the key people that actually brought remote viewing to the rest of the world
Right.
as well. So these people have been
And
involved in this going back 5 decades or more now. Absolutely.
and do you think that's simply because they know each other and they work well together, or do you think that there's a bigger agenda there? I mean, you just don't know at
I
this
think it's
point.
both. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
both. I think there's because I mean, Harry Putoff, started working in the NSA, for example. Then he went to SRI, and
Yeah.
he's been doing everything ever since. I think it's all about connections and people and trust
Right.
at those levels. Um, yeah, so yeah, I think it's both those. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that the little bit of information is coming out that has, because it's been validating, I think, for people like us.
Yes,
We can take the tinfoil hats off a little bit,
we
you
can.
know?
For many years, I had people laughing at me every time I mention
Yeah.
UFOs, and now it's like,
Yep.
oh, you're not laughing so much anymore, are you?
No, but they don't want to talk about it either. They
No, no.
dismiss
And
it.
that's what drives me crazy. It's just like these are the biggest revelations to humankind. They could literally change everything if
Yep.
what we know is real and what Grush is saying to Congress. If we can just get all this detail, the science, get it all out in the open, it could change everything for us as human beings.
Right.
I guess some people just don't want to change.
What bugs me the most about this, Daz, is I often look at, like, what aren't they saying? Because I think that's important to look at what they're not talking about. And when you think of UAPs and UFOs and the history, and you go back to the 80s and early 90s, how many abduction stories came out? How many people
Yeah,
had similar stories? And no one mentions it. They're saying, well, these craft exist, which is consistent with all the
yeah,
testimony we have. We're not going to talk about who's flying it, and we're not going to talk about the people that said they've encountered them, and we're not
yeah.
going to talk about the people that said they've been abducted and experimented on.
Well,
Why?
that's a different story, one that I alluded to earlier that I have new information on. That we can talk offline about.
Yeah.
But we could most probably make that a very soon podcast view to reveal
Yeah.
that for the first time.
Okay. All right. Let's put that on the back burner. So there's a teaser there, friends. And why don't we leave it at that? Bob Lazar was an amazing project. Ultimately, Daz, do you believe the story based on the data?
Yes, I think this, I was 50-50 before. Or no, I was probably 60-40 for belief. I'm probably 70-75% more on the belief now. It just
Okay.
bolstered my belief in it a bit more.
Yeah. And I'll caveat that. I'll say I believe that Bob Lazar believes the story he's telling.
Yes.
Whether it's been manipulated or not, the jury's still out for me on that one.
Yeah. That's a better way of saying it. Yes.
Yeah. So for those of you that are watching, weigh in on it. What are your thoughts on this? Is it legit? Is it not? Where's the rabbit hole go? And Daz and I are going to do a deep dive that'll probably come out in episode 2, talking about some of the woo connected with some things. I'll give a teaser to that. Daz, you posted something today, like 10 minutes before we got online here, with Bob Lazar from 1989, talking about someone or something referring to the human body as containers. So I'd like to start off there with our next discussion. So for those of you watching, again, share your thoughts on that. A big thank you to Daz Smith and the Future Forecasting Group. I'm Dennis Nappi II. Thanks for watching.